Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Interlocking Threads, Conversations with International Students. This is a project we started to connect with international alumni through casual conversations grounded in our current situation and past shared experiences. This episode was recorded on June 30th, when we spoke with Mafer Landin from Mexico and Andrey Borokhovich from Russia about how their plans have changed due to the global pandemic, our common uncertainty of what's next, and what to do in the meantime. We hope you enjoy, and thank you for listening. So, thank you for today's guests, Mafer and Andrey, for joining us. And before we really get started, we're going to just go through a few short introductions, first of our production team, and then Lynn will introduce our two guests a little more. So, my name is Annika, and I graduated from Earlham College in 2019 and worked with Lynn, who you will hear from in a second, starting my first year at Earlham, like my first few days there. And I'm an international student from Germany myself, and I'm now part of the production team for the Interlocking Threads project. So I'm here with Lynn, the connecting thread between us all, and Rihanna, another member of the production team, and our two guests. And we have a fourth member on our production team, Lan, who is an international student from Vietnam, and she will be behind the scenes during this project, working as our tech wizard, so we could not do anything without her. And now I'll turn it over to Rihanna and Lynn to introduce themselves.
Well, hello, my name is Rihanna. I graduated from Earlham this May, and I graduated with a degree in Sociology and Anthropology just a year after Mafer. And I actually met Lynn later in my college career when I began organizing student programs. And then I've been working with Lynn, Annika, and Lon on different versions of this project since January.
And my name is Lynn Knight. And the students that are going to be part of this project, I've worked with at Earlham College for over 30 years. So this group is a group of recent grads when I was the director of events and operations. And I worked with these students in a variety of different areas, from summer camps and conferences to a food pantry to working events and box office. And that's how I got to know everybody. And I will start off with Mafer Landin. Her country of origin is Mexico. She graduated with a degree in Psychology, Sociology, and Anthropology. She is currently working at the Quaker Voluntary Service Program Assistant at Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. I remember Mafer held a variety of roles with me in the events office. You worked with events in the box office as an usher. You worked with summer camps and conferences. In fact, the Secret Garden tour that I had taken a group of students on one summer, that was just this past weekend. So that memory popped up on my Facebook page. And I have a picture of all of you on this deck at this pond. And we stayed there the longest because y'all wanted to just stay on the deck and get lots of sun. I posed in front of this big red sports car. So you also helped with the food pantry, which was a special project started by the college about 3 years ago. And is there anything you want to add, Mafer, before I go on to Andrey as an introduction?
No, I think that's wonderful. And yeah, I also worked at the box office for, I think, 2 years. And that was a great experience for sure. And it's been a pleasure working with you in all of these different projects.
All right. Then we have Andrey Borokhovich. Country of origin was Russia. His major for graduation was business and nonprofit management and international studies. And Andrey is currently in Israel. I got to know Andrey in the food committee. I think that was one of the first times. He was a commencement usher. He also is the major force behind getting the food pantry started at Earlham. He worked on the manual for the food pantry. And in fact, he was the one that got it started. And so the food pantry today is due in large part because of the leadership of Andrey. And so I have to say thank you, because that was a project. It took over a year for the college to agree to it. And if we were not successful, it would not have made it. So I have to say a special shout out to Andre for getting that one started. And do you have anything you want to add, Andre?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Okay. So I guess kind of our first general question, we just want to check in how you guys are doing, especially right now, like what your life is like right now with the pandemic and everything. Maybe you can start, Mafer, just, whatever you want to say for now, we get started with that.
For sure. Well, I think I've been lucky in all of this pandemic because I've been doing this program, as Lynn mentioned, Quaker Voluntary Service. So I really got to quarantine with 5 other people, which can be both a blessing and a curse. It's been really lovely because I live in a community I live in an intentional community that's spiritual, and like we're very intentional about our relationships. So obviously the pandemic has been hard on all of us, but it's been nice to have each other, and we've gotten to explore new ways of being spiritual with each other, and like of forming community and supporting each other in the process. I was definitely affected by the pandemic in terms of my future plans. I was originally thinking of staying in Portland, Oregon to work, but obviously because of the entire immigration processes that changed, I ended up having different plans. But I think I would say overall I'm doing okay with the quarantine. Fortunately, Portland hasn't had as many cases as many other cities in the United States. So we've been lucky in that. And it's just beginning to open after 4 months of intense quarantine. Yeah. What about you, Andre?
Well, I actually got lucky as well, because when I came to Israel, I was actually on the program, and we had like our own little campus. So we kind of got locked up in the campus. So we had like a little territory and like a little garden and like 100 people on a closed territory, which is, I think was nice in a way that we could actually like go out and like communicate with other people in person. So like I feel like my quarantine experience was very different from what a lot of other people have experienced. Right now though, Israel is open, like open, but at the same time the number of cases is basically at the level when it was locked, like everything was closed, which is really interesting. But they're not closing it down because they say that they have no money, but they might consider it in the future. It's kind of a mess here. It's similar to an American situation, to be honest, as I follow the news. And yeah, it definitely, Corona definitely changed my plans in a lot of ways, like partially with grad school, partially with work, as like I wanted to continue my studies next year, but I'm kind of unable to do that right now. And also finding work during this time is much harder than it would have been.
So Mafer, are you working from your home, or are you able to go into work?
Yeah, no, from the beginning, we started working from home. We were one of the first organizations in Portland that started working from home, for which I'm really helpful, because I work in an organization that is basically health professionals, doctors, nurses, and other public health advocates. And so we got to hear about COVID-19 pretty much before everyone else, at least in the nonprofit sector in Portland. And so we were one of the first ones to start working from home and start like advocating so that other people work from home. So I've been doing that. In fact, last week we completely got rid of our office. We managed to transition so well into working from home that we needed an office anymore. And so yeah, I've been in my house this entire time, which has been interesting. Being with 5 other people working from home has been definitely interesting to adapt to.
That kind of feeds into my question for both of you, which is, well, now that Portland is reopening, like you're working from home, what are some protocols that you're doing when you go out from home that may be the same or different from other people? And like what's been expected from like a state level? And that's also both for you, Andre, of well, now that it's all open, like, what are you doing for yourself to be able to keep yourself safe, or etc.?
I'll let you start, Andre.
Well, I feel like I'm based in Jerusalem right now, and I feel like the situation in Jerusalem is much different than it's like in Tel Aviv and other big cities in Israel, because kind of the epicenters of new cases are located there, partially because it's like the beach is there and all these things, and like people are walking without masks and stuff. But I feel like in Jerusalem, people are more careful, and like we are all like required to wear masks. I'm not sure what the situation with the gloves in the US, but they're not necessarily mandatory to wear here. So I don't know. I don't really go out that much, even though like everything is open. I usually just go to the supermarket like once in a week and a half, and that's pretty much like all I do outside. So yeah, that's how I keep myself safe.
In my case, I think it was very particular because one of my housemates used to work at a nonprofit that helps individuals with physical disabilities. So it's a pretty much vulnerable population. And then two other of my housemates work at a nonprofit that helps youth who are houseless. And so these three people work with very, very vulnerable populations for this virus. And so we had to be very, very careful from the beginning of the types of exposure that we had. So we really fully quarantined for like pretty much 2 months until they stopped going to work. And then as things started reopening, well, first of all, we had like a very intense protocol at the beginning where like we washed our hands all the time, and we're like leave everything outside, and we wash all of our clothes if we had to even like just go to, I don't know, to the park. So at the beginning it was very, very intense, and then we kind of relaxed a little bit when they started working. But obviously we still wear masks when we go outside, and we really, really limit our time outside. The only thing that we really do is going to the grocery shop, which is once a month at the most. And lately we've been going more on walks, on socially distant walks or socially distant bike rides, which is easier in Portland because the streets are very big and there's a lot of nature around. So that has been easier than I think would have been if we were in a bigger city. Yeah, but as things start to reopen, we need to remind ourselves that the virus still exists, and so we're still not going fully out, even though restaurants are open and bars are open. We're still pretty much quarantining.
Okay, I have another one. As international alums, chances are your family is not in the country where you're currently presiding. So what impact is that having on you, in that your family is not just in another state or another city or a county, they're in a whole other country?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's very real. And thank you for asking that, because not that many people realize that. And it's true. Currently, like Mexico they're increasingly growing in cases, but not only that, we have one of the highest death rates of the entire world at the moment. I think 10% or something. So it's been scary, knowing that, for example, the US has been opening, and that everyone is kind of acting like it's normal again, and still knowing that the people I know are still very much at risk. And I think my family is safe because I really told them from the beginning that when the virus first got to the US, I told them this is more serious than you can actually see, or that you're really seeing on international media. So they've been socially isolating from before the country really did anything about it. But I think the most impact that we've had, and I'm pretty sure for Andre as well, has been the immigration changes that have been happening. I mean, obviously we had great news with DACA continuing for longer, but then we also had big losses, like ending the H-1 visas and J visas, which is a huge impact for a lot of international students.
For me, it was actually, I think I've gotten much closer with my family over this time. It's definitely, when it just started, I was worried a lot, especially because my grandma lives by herself. I live with my aunt and grandma, and my aunt works in the north, and she actually, like, because of the COVID, had a difficulty kind of going back home during this time because like all the flights and everything was canceled, so like she kind of had to stay there for the summer. And my grandma, she just like a really active person. She just loves to like go on walks, loves to socialize, loves to like I don't know, like go around in our like little town. And it's been really hard to convince her to like stay home. And but also I feel like just because kind of we made her stay home, we also committed ourselves to communicate with her. So we've been talking much more, and we've been actually like sharing news, and I feel like it's like the pandemic gotten us closer together through kind of the difficult times we've gotten together. Yeah.
I was going to ask Andre, do you have her up to date on technology? Is she doing Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp?
WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mafer.
Yeah, no, I was just asking. I'm also interested in hearing about y'all's perspective. You know, you're also international, and you're also going through it. Even though you're the interviewers, you know, it's important to hear your voices too.
Well, I can say something because that would also be kind of part of my next question. I really like and feel similar to what you guys have said. A lot of, and it may be a bit different for me, is that my like day-to-day life hasn't changed a lot because of COVID. At least not in the last few months. Like I already was right now at my job, and I'm in the US right now too. I was already basically working from home, so I mean we go out less and stuff like that. I don't go anywhere now except for the supermarket like you guys, so that hasn't changed. But the biggest change for me, and you both have mentioned that, is like future uncertainties, and like my future plans and ideas have totally changed throughout. Not just because of COVID, but that's definitely a good piece of it too. And so I guess that's also, I think, the piece that I struggle with the most about this often. I mean, sometimes I think I can be very accepting, like, okay, we're all in the same situation. Sometimes that helps to know that it's not just me that's so uncertain about my future, but we're all kind of in a similar situation. But sometimes I definitely struggle with that, of like, okay, like how, we're so young in our lives, like how do we where do we go from here? Like, where is our space here in this kind of weird time? So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. It's an impossible question, but
I think it's a hard question, but in a way I also feel more for the people who just graduated. Like we all, well, not Rihanna, but Andre, Annika, and I graduated in 2019, so we kind of had a year of figuring things out while still things were calm, or like we had a little bit more flexibility in the things that we were doing. And it was still hard, obviously, but we had options. And I think and I'd be interested in hearing Rihanna's perspective on this as well. But for the people who just graduated, like, I don't know how so many people were going to grad school. So many people were thinking of applying to jobs, and then the H-1 visas were canceled. So like, I think the people who have partied the hardest are the people who just graduated. But Rihanna, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, a couple of things. I mean, so we got the call in March, and it was, okay, all domestic students like must go home. And so I packed up my car and I drove home to Montana. And at that point, I mean, it was just virtual learning. So, I had a thesis to write, and it was pretty much you had to change the rhythm of things, which was difficult. And also just thinking about settings. I mean, I'm also very curious about like going into a work environment that's also your home environment, because that was a really interesting dynamic. It's like, how do I actually compartmentalize my space now when my space is so multidimensional? So rhythm definitely changed for sure. And that's another question I want to get into in a second. But change of plans. I mean, I've been thinking about grad school, I've been thinking about job opportunities, but those are no longer in the same, I mean, even job opportunities now are changing so much, and it's quite uncertain. So I definitely feel like I kind of have to wait it out. And then it becomes, okay, like I was actually had to ask myself the questions, okay, like what do you want? Which is now limited to where you are presently. And that's like, okay, what can I actually do right now? Because everything that I think we evolve around in plans and future plans is like, what do I have to get ready for that next step? And if that next step is so uncertain, then can I do right here, right now? And so where I'm at is Montana. I'm back home in Montana. And so like Portland, the rurality of Montana, we were not hit during the first wave, like maybe 6 cases tops, getting closer to April, but it was not anything serious. And now it's finally, we're hitting the first wave where like it's hitting home. And I was just listening to like the deputy doctor who is the one who's kind of keeping tabs on everything in our county. And she was saying that it's happening in 3 ways that it's actually being contracted the most. One is people leaving the state to visit family and coming back and bringing it with them. Family out of state coming to Montana and bringing it with them. And then the third, which is actually the most spreadable, is young people socializing in bars. And so that's a huge dilemma, and especially for our age, because how do you combat that desire of wanting to socialize? So post-grad life is now becoming like, okay, you're an adult. Like, what decisions do you have to make now? So those things.
It is actually interesting how the way that the disease spread has changed, because I also listened to an NPR episode about that right now, like the increase in cases actually is coming from the younger generation. And it's what's really bad about it is that they don't really have any symptoms, but then they can spread it to other people. And it's kind of the same in Israel, because like the coastal area cities, some of them have really old on average population, like 60 plus, like about 20%. But at the same time, because of the beaches and tourism and everything, like there are a lot of young people there. So like it's kind of putting the elderly population at risk at the kind of cost of young people having fun. It's kind of interesting how it's all changed.
I also wonder, a lot of the push for reopening has been obviously economic reasons. And while I have criticized that highly, like I see it, for example, at home in Mexico City, when most of the income that people have is informal, or like, most of the businesses are really informal, like people selling things on the street and things like that. And so basically with the closing, all of their income went away, or like all of the opportunities of income went away. And so like I think a lot of the spikes in cases have been also like because people need to go outside, and people haven't needed to reopen to kind of like balance things in their lives, not only in the social, not only to socialize, that too, but to also make sure that they have sustainable living. So that's been also hard for me to wrap my head around, to put both wanting safety for the community in that regard, but also like understanding that a lot of people can't afford to self-isolate for as long as we should.
But I feel like it also kind of depends on the governmental policies that are in place, because I feel like, did small businesses get a lot in the US during the pandemic? Like, I'm not sure that they did. And like, I feel like the process was really highly bureaucratic, and it was really hard for them to get any funding from the government. I know like it's the case in Russia, like a lot of small businesses closed just because they couldn't get the funding from the government. But I feel like in some European countries where the social security network is actually pretty robust.
In the United States, and I know in particular for Indiana, the small businesses were allowed to apply for grants, which was great and it helped, but there is a very minute time frame that you have to pay that grant back. It's not free money. You still have to pay it back. For some of the small businesses, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I had some of that experience too. Like one part of my job is that I actually assist in some things with an old restored hotel hot springs in Montana, which is funny because that's where Rihanna is. And it's been interesting because I kind of got to see like a little bit of how, like usually I would just hear from employees what their situation, what they're struggling with and everything. And because I was involved with that, I kind of got to hear the business perspective of like, okay, we are also like trying to do our best to make sure that we can survive and still provide jobs for the community and also provide our services for the community. But then we also want to be really safe, and we want to make sure that we're just being really safe. It was really a struggle for the business to kind of keep everyone on the same page of like being there for work and being safe and following the guidelines and all of that. And with what you said about the grants, that place did actually get several. We were pretty lucky. I think we got several different fundings, but the biggest one, which is the one that kind of is necessary to keep us alive, is one that you can get as a grant without having to pay it back, but only if you rehire like if you have the same amount of employees after a certain amount of time, and you're kind of back to your normal like business operation after a certain amount of time. And so that was kind of the same struggle, is like then we are pushed to like reopen really fast and like get back to normal really fast when we're still at a time when we maybe shouldn't really be doing that. So yeah,
I was reading that Indiana is really, really fully open, right? I think they're in phase 4. Lena, you're still in Indiana?
Yes, we did get word. I'm one of the administrators for a Facebook group page, Richmond Response and Resource for COVID-19. So once this all started, we worked together to get masks and information about the virus in Indiana, in our county, our city. And it just came out yesterday that Elkhart County, which is in northern Indiana, they have a mandatory, starting today, ordinance that you have to wear a mask when you're in public, because their numbers are spiking. They're number 3 in the state. So Indianapolis is still up there, and I think it's LaGrange is number 2. But Elkhart County, which is a rural county, is now one of the top. And so they have to wear masks.
To be fully honest, it's kind of scary because I'm moving back to Indiana in August. And so like going from a city that has been like really, really strict and is just now opening after 4 months, moving into Indiana, which is like already like pretty much open, and the people I've talked to, they don't seem to acknowledge that it's kind of still happening. It's kind of scary for me to be moving back into a state that's fully open. Yeah.
What are you doing in Indiana?
I am doing a master's at ESR actually. So I'm going back to Earlham. Yeah.
Which master's are you doing?
It's a new one. They just opened in the Peace and Social Transformation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a year-long master's.
Yeah. I saw that. That's fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Have a good time. Yeah.
It feels like a good continuation after Quaker Voluntary Service. It's very much in the same lines.
Yeah.
You go back to Rihanna. You have firsthand experience with COVID right now where you're working, correct?
Yeah.
Can you share?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So in the town that I work in, it's quite small and it's very tourist driven. So we're right on the north entrance of Yellowstone Park. So it's a very seasonal space. So you have 180 days to make enough money to pay 360 days of bills. So when the tourist economy comes, you make the most of it. And this goes into a question I want to ask about rhythm, which is, we're delayed. Like summer is very delayed here. We're like 2 to 3 weeks behind. And so by the time you're getting into mid-June, and it's almost July, you're feeling like you just began. And so you're constantly feeling a little behind. But business-wise, like we're ahead for my restaurant, like our profit is ahead of last year this time. So there's still people coming in. And just the protocols have changed. So I wear a mask when I serve. But the interesting thing that I've noticed is all servers are wearing masks. And I've only had one table who was like these 2 women from Wisconsin about my age. And they were the first people to be saying like, I feel so bad I don't have my mask on right now. Like you wearing your mask is making me feel like I want to wear a mask. And it's interesting because the people who are coming in, there are people here with their children, which is very regular for this time. School is out. But there's also very elderly people who are coming here because it's tradition. So it's like people who are in their 80s, some people are in wheelchairs, and they're coming with their like mid-age family members. And I have to ask myself, like, what are you doing? What are you doing here, you know? And so I've definitely noticed there are less international tourists coming. It's definitely much more Americans who are used to like, this is tradition, like this is traditional summer plans that are still being done. I also think that people have cabin fever and they just need to get out, like restlessness. But being in the service industry is interesting because it's about efficiency. And being a waitress, like you have 2 hands and like the one thing I always ask for is like, I wish I had 4 more hands, because you need more time. And that's been one of the most interesting things I've been reflecting on in the service industry, is that things have to change in the service industry to be able to accommodate being hygienic. Because if I'm a waitress going from taking an order to going into the kitchen to take out food to a customer and then also bussing a table, I'm touching everyone's mouth with my hands and then transferring it. So you have to take the time to then wash your hands in between. But there's not the same expectation that service is changing either, because it's about time. So everyone's hungry, people are dehydrated, like hangry for sure. And you're trying to serve and get what people need in a time frame that hasn't changed its expectation. So when I think about, and you know, you're also docked tip-wise if you're not serving that expectation. So that's been something I've been wondering.
I think it's very interesting what you mentioned about like why they're still going and saying that it's because of the tradition, because I think it's true. I think a lot of people are finding it really hard to realize how their lives must change, and I think honestly I understand. Like people are going through a lot of loss and a lot of grief and like really shaking everything that you've known and like realizing that you can't live your normal life ever again. It's so scary. And so people are finding like these small ways to going back into their routines and like trying to break the rules in their smallest ways, just to like have a sense of what used to be their reality. And obviously it's it there comes with a lot of privilege to be able to do that, but at the same time, like I understand like the grief that comes behind that, and not wanting to realize that everything has changed.
So if you were in a position of authority to make some edicts for your areas of what people shouldn't be doing and the way they're handling it in your areas, would you make changes? Any of you?
Of course.
Such as?
No, for us, it's just mostly, I feel like reinforcing, because like, you know, they say that there is a fine, they say that like everybody has to like wear a mask, but people don't really do that, and like nobody really cares. And like there is not even like people who see other people going without a mask, they usually don't say anything to them, or like the police also doesn't stop them even though like they're supposed to. And like at the store, they like some stores do provide kind of like hand sanitizer at the entrance and at um, the exit, but like not all of them do, and I feel like it would be good if all of them done that, because like we touch a lot of things in the stores, and then like people just go and like touch their face, touch everything. So yeah, like at least that. But also kind of I feel like right now, especially in Israel, as I said, everything is open. I feel like everything either should be back closed, or at least like the also the market here, where like they sell fresh fruits, vegetables and stuff, it's not regulated at all. People, the sellers there, they're like also without masks, without gloves, without nothing, and people like still go there and buy stuff. And I don't know, what's happening, why is it happening this way, but like I feel like it definitely has to be changed.
For me, I think I wouldn't use the reinforcement of the rules, because that can lead to problematic things with the police here especially. but definitely encouraging more the messaging of wearing masks. And then kind of like just not giving the option for people to go out. Like I know that they open restaurants here, and so people started forgetting that it was still a thing. So like pushing it just a little bit longer, I think would have been my preference. Yeah, I think Portland in general has been really good about their policies, but just pushing a little bit further the messaging is not something that I would have done.
And also, I feel like people, it's kind of hard for some people to find things to do at home. So I feel like both the governments and maybe like it's kind of initiative based, I guess. Governments and some corporations can just like do some stuff for people to, I don't know, to watch, to learn, to I know like Coursera, for example, like did like free courses back in the day, but like now it's ending. But also I feel like there's a lot of like potential, especially with the like unemployment going up. Maybe like, I don't know, Ministry of Labor's like doing online courses where like they like teach people new skills, so when like the market is back up and they can like find job easier in easier ways. Like I don't know, I feel like governments can be doing more to like engage people while they're at home, if it makes sense. If it makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's true. On that note, also like providing more means by which people can like stop working or working from home without fearing losing their jobs. Like so there was a stimulus check, sure, but that's what, like $1,000, $2,000 that really go away really quickly. But if you have rules that like people can't lose their jobs, or I don't know, people can't get evicted, things like that, that gives people much more freedom to take care of themselves safely without having to risk themselves by going out to work or like to try to find another job. Yeah, look, maybe I wouldn't change necessarily the COVID specific related things, but the money things I would for sure help more people, because that would help hugely.
Yeah, like especially for the vulnerable populations, as you said, that because most of the people, like populations who get most of the cases are exactly like the ones who work in the service industry or the ones who work in the low paying jobs, which is like they have to get this paycheck in order to like to pay rent and stuff, and there's no help for them. Yeah, definitely.
I think Motez, I was speaking with Motez online. I think Annika, you might have been there during when he said this. I think he said it so eloquently of, we're facing something so unorthodox, but we know we do not have any like unorthodox services provided. It's like we're still undergoing like how the orthodoxy has been, and it's no longer that way, and yet we don't have any like welfare services or anything to combat that. And so I really do think that has to change, and that just goes, you know. But the other thing that that you both are hitting on is like this idea of like, what do you then do with your time? Because in a sense, like being out of college, I mean, that was in a very privileged sense. It was like, wow, I was just given the gift of time to just take a moment and just ask myself, okay, now what? And now it's kind of like, you just have time to be. And what are you going to do with that? And it really did be like, okay, well, what do I want to make? I'm cooking a lot more, you know, all these things, like what do you preoccupy yourself with? And I think that we've even spoken of, like touched on this earlier, of like the rhythm has changed. So how do we adapt to this rhythm? And in this time frame where the rhythm doesn't really feel consistent yet, you know, we're still kind of like, okay, are we back to normal? But back to normal doesn't really exist. So how have you guys been gauging rhythm? And I mean, I think that's also the interesting thing, is the rhythm is changing. And so when we get back to normal, I think the rhythm won't be the same rhythm it was. It's going to be maybe slower paced, faster paced. It's going to be different, but maybe that will be more consistent than it's been. So what do you guys think about this?
For me, it's been interesting, and you mentioned this before, like the relationship with space. Like working from home, like the hardest thing of working from home is that I really don't have a definition of when work starts and when work ends, and it starts my personal life. So that's been just so hard for me to like focus on things, because sometimes I want to, I don't know, do my laundry when I'm working, or like I don't know. I eat at very interesting times. So or like I nap at very interesting times. And so that has been the main issue for me. Something that I really noticed is basically our spring was lost. And like all these plans that I had for the spring, they just were completely gone. And so a lot of contemplation has been happening on my end from the beginning, because I don't know if you know this, but Portland is a really, really rainy and kind of cold-ish city. And so during the spring, I was really looking forward for the spring and like to see the sun and to see all of the roses and the tulips that bloom around here. And so I didn't get to see that in the way that I wanted, but like when I used to go on walks at the beginning of my social isolation, I really got to see how the world started blooming and how like everything was stopping but nature. Like it was a really dissonant thing to know that everything was so chaotic and everything was shutting down, but all these trees were beautiful and all these roses were blooming. It's a really weird time. So contemplation has been part of my rhythm and my routine for sure. And also, yeah, really reconnecting with people that I don't know. I feel like as international students, we move so often, and like part of my day, my way of dealing with it has been like kind of like compartmentalizing each of the groups that I have and kind of living in the moment. It's like I'm here in QBS, and so like I focus so much on the relationship that I have here immediate to me, but like really this pushed me to look back into the relationships that were still present, but like I needed to reconnect with. And so even with my family, I understood that you got closer with your family. I'm really happy to hear that. For me as well, like calling more of my friends, calling more family has been something. I think that's been true for a lot of people. I also think there was a big messaging at the beginning of this quarantine. You have to read a book and you have to write a novel. Like there was so much pressure, at least in the beginning, and I just couldn't handle it. It's like, no, this is not the time to be doing these things.
Yeah, I don't know what to add. Like I feel like for me personally, I've been kind of chaotic about everything. It's just like there's so much been happening, and at first I'm just the type of person who likes to have a structure. I like to have like a routine at least for like 6 months, and then to change it. But recently it's just been like a month went by and I had to like readjust. Another month went by and I had to readjust. And then, like after a while I just like give up. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go with the flow and like do like not plan for anything, because probably all my plans are gonna be ruined anyway in one way or another. So yeah, I've definitely been thinking uh, a lot about reconnecting with people, different people in my life as well, because like especially I feel like in the times of crisis, it's when we actually stop to realize how valuable the connections that we have are. So yeah, that's definitely been a big part of my routine, but also right now in a non-existent routine, I'm just kind of trying to see what comes my way and like trying to seize the opportunity. I don't know, rather than like trying to plan for something, because right now I don't know, someone said, I think Rihanna said it, that like at this point we just like have to wait it out until like everything is back to normal. But what the normal will be, like, who knows.
I don't think it's ever coming back to normal, if I'm being fully honest.
Yeah,
Like, even when I think about maybe even like going back to work in the same way that I was, just taking the bus, it's never gonna be the same experience. Like no matter how much like I try to do the same things, just like the fact that I have to wear a mask to go to like that in itself already changes the entire thing of how it used to be. And that's just a small thing, but I don't think we'll ever be able to. Maybe in I don't know 10 years or something, but I don't think we'll ever be able to see things in a way.
less than that.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I just think about like this might be a little bit embarrassing, but like all of the times that I washed my hands now, I wouldn't have thought about it in the past. Like last year, I was not washing my hands enough, and I am I'm confident in saying that none of us were. And then so just thinking, just having it in the back of my head all of the time when I watch Netflix now, I see characters and I'm always like, oh my god, they're not washing their hands like they're doing that. Oh, they're too close to each other. It's always this thing. I don't think we can ever go back to how it was.
So do you either of you have? Because I mean, I think it's so different now. Like I think in the beginning it was everybody was kind of like, okay, you know, what's happening, what are we going through here, and like what is life gonna look like after we get out. And it's more and more, it's kind of like, not that, it's a lot more chaotic than that. I think at this point, because it's kind of going in waves, and it's not really, I mean, in the beginning I think everybody was like, this will be over in a few months, or like, and now everybody's kind of like what you said, Mafer, everybody's kind of realizing that, okay, things are not really going back to normal, and it's very different, and we have to like grapple with this in a very different way than maybe we thought. And I think in the beginning, what kind of, I mean, of course I was really like privileged and lucky that it didn't affect my like livelihood at that time, and it still doesn't. Like right now I still have a job and a place to live. I don't know if that might be over at some point, but right now that's true. And a lot of people, of course, aren't that lucky, but for me, in that way, I kind of, in the beginning, it also opened up like some, like these drastic changes open up some possibilities of, okay, like, might there be some things because of like the healthcare that's needed now, and the different infrastructures, the different like welfare infrastructures and social systems that we kind of would need, which is not working very well in the US especially, and in a lot of places, I think. And so I was wondering about whether this is like a positive, could this be like a positive push for some like positive changes in that way. And I'm not sure like that I'm that positive in a way anymore, but I'm just wondering what you guys are thinking about that, what you guys are seeing. And I think also, I guess that kind of ties into also the protests, especially in the US. I don't know what the situation is in Israel with that, but it kind of feels like it's of course it's very different, but it's like it's in a similar, like it's all kind of together, like it's similar. The issues are definitely connected in a lot of different ways, and it's affecting like the vulnerable populations. Black communities are affected the most, and also other people of color communities are affected the most in the US by both of these, by policing and other racist structures, as well as COVID-19. And so how could maybe both of these like crisis situations in a way like transform? I don't know if that, yeah, not that probably no one has any solutions, but I just, my question is more like what your reflections are on that, or kind of contemplations, thoughts, not asking for any solutions.
Go ahead, Andrey. I see you have a
No, personally, I think that the situation highlighted how a lot of things are interconnected and interlinked in a lot of ways. Because as you said, like for like the communities of color get more cases of COVID, which is like related to the places where they live, which is like the segregation and all this stuff, and it kind of shows how it's all connected, and also connected to the climate change, and how all those problems actually kind of, it's not that we need to find one solution, and like we actually need to look for solutions that encompass all those different angles and kind of do different things at the same time. And that's what I was actually thinking recently more with the protests going on in the US, in the sense that there is definitely in every country many communities that experience similar things that communities of color in the US do. And I was thinking that it would be really nice if there was more international communication for like finding solutions for these problems, because I feel like every country, when it comes to like solving those things, it's kind of it's all kind of separated, and it's all kind of within this country, within this community. While I feel like kind of communicating, sharing ideas, sharing like different methods of addressing and finding solutions would be like very helpful and actually would advance us forward faster. I know, for example, how for the protests in the US, people use different tactics that people in Hong Kong used like last year and this year. So like it's kind of already happening, but I feel like there could be more of that, and it would definitely advance or like increase the pace of addressing those different issues.
Yeah, I also got to think a lot about how these things are connected. And it was hard for me, and you mentioned specifically climate change. Like, I obviously I think climate change is real and all of these things, but I was never part of climate change activist group, and I was kind of distant of it until I started working this year at Oregon PSR, and then I really got to understand all the like I always thought the climate movement and the social justice movement are separate things, and I don't think they are at all separate. I think they all come from the same root, and then there's really just like racist systems. And I think, as you mentioned, like climate change, the public health crisis, and the things that are happening after the murder of George Floyd, are really all coming from the same root of inequality. And so I think, as much as it is chaotic, this moment can help people realize that all of our problems will continue to happen if we don't tackle racist institutions and racist systems. I think that's just the core of it. So again, it's really all chaotic, and I'm really sad that all of this had to happen for us to realize that. But maybe we have an opportunity now to start having these conversations and to start doing things about it.
Yeah, and also like different systems of exploitation as well. Like I feel like with the COVID, the dream of the, I don't know, socialists kind of came through in a little ways, like the universal income stuff. It was kind of the first step. Maybe like governments realize that it will need to continue, but at the same time, like I've been really pessimistic throughout the entire process. I feel like it can go both ways, just because right now governments also have more power to like reinforce different things onto people, and when you get that power, sometimes you just don't want to give it back, which is why like I'm afraid that some governments decide that, well, now I'm gonna be like more skewing more right or skewing more authoritarian after the crisis. But it can go both ways, definitely.
I guess I have maybe a follow-up on, I think something like wondering, I mean, it might be different for both of you because you're in different places now, but I think something I was kind of reflecting on with, especially when the anti-racist protests started in the US, was like my kind of, as an international student in the US, or not student, but as an immigrant in the US, I guess, I still struggle with like, what, am I not a student anymore? How is that a thing? But like, so in the beginning, when that started, I think one of my first things was actually like, I was like looking to Germany, and I was like, is anybody there gonna say something? Because they should say something. And so that's one piece of it, is like that somehow, even though it started here and everything, I like, my immediate focus was like going to Germany and like, okay, like what's going on there. And even I felt frustrated in the beginning, both because it seemed very, in the beginning I wasn't really seeing a lot from people, or what's, what kind of, we're on these topics, and I think it's picked up more, and I've also found communities there that I can look to and kind of listen to, and I'm also frustrated because like what's my space? Because I don't know if you guys heard Joanne, our I think Mafer and Rihanna at least had classes with her. I remember her saying, our professor, her saying at some point, you know, she was in, I don't know where exactly she was in Latin America. I think she was doing work there, and at some point she was like, well, I'm going back to the US because I can't be an activist in a different country, kind of thing. And I've been reflecting on that, like what's my space, like first of all, what's my right in a way, like to say something here in some ways, but also what's like my, like I have obviously my culture, of course we struggle a lot with the same issue, like there's a lot of problems with racism in Germany, and there's a lot of similarities to like the struggles to the US. And you know what you said about international communication, Andre, and there's definitely a lot that we can learn from each other, and at the same time we share different histories. Like there's different dynamics, and there's different histories, there's different cultures that like deal with these things differently and have dealt with them differently in the past. And so I kind of like, I have that different culture background that like doesn't necessarily fit. I mean, of course now, like 4 years after 4 years of college in the US, I maybe know more about the US in some ways than I know about Germany, and at the same time I still have the like cultural background of Germany. So anyway, I guess my point is that I've kind of been struggling with that, like what's my space in either place. Like I'm not in Germany right now, but do I have a space there even though I'm not there right now? And then I am in the US, but like what's my space here, because I'm here but I'm not from here originally. So yeah.
No, honestly, no, it's just really funny because I've been thinking a lot about this in the past 3 weeks. Just because like right now I'm in Israel and I'm like an Israeli citizen right now, and I'm also like Russian and I've been in the US, and I'm like, how do I reconcile all of these identities and like what do I do with them? I've been really confused for some time now, and I'm still thinking about it. Like I don't know.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Wow, you guys. This is like the question that international students ask themselves all the time. Yeah, where do I belong? I think part of it, and you asked at the beginning, like how has it impacted your future plans? I think this has really made me question like all the messaging that has been imposed onto me specifically, but onto like really most international students, or onto most people who migrate to the United States specifically, is that the US is like this, well, like obviously like the what we call the American dream, but like that the US is always better than all of our countries, and that we'll get more opportunities and stuff. And like really analyzing that and really asking myself whether that's true, or like really like, I don't know, it's hard sometimes as an international student with everything that's happening, like knowing that a lot of people don't want us here. And so that's just hard to wrap myself around. And I just been thinking like what types of things I could do if I went home as well. And like again, exactly, and again that is the real question that we have to ask, like what is my role there? Like I'm gonna go to Mexico, but I have all of these experiences and background that like most of the people there don't have, like a college education, like a completely different context, and I have a completely different social context than most people. So like even if I were to go back, I don't fully fit in there either. But like, yeah, just questioning myself the messaging that has been put on to us of like we should stay in the US and we should change our lives into the more an American type of way. Yeah, but thank you for asking that. Wow, yeah, because
It
wow.
is the ongoing struggle, I feel like.
It's interesting for me to hear you talk about that, because you are not, your home country of origin is not the United States. So where do you fit? Where do you fit in all of this? Goes back to the whole idea of why this project was put together to begin with is because that international experience for college students, there's a lot that's alike as a domestic, but there's so many more layers to being an international that a lot of people are not aware of. But to hear you say, as an international, you don't know where you fit in all of this because you're not in your country of origin either. And I hadn't even, that's something new for me to hear you say that. I know you have perspectives and we value that. And as someone from a much older generation, I'm looking to you for answers. So to me, it doesn't matter whether you're international. I think in some ways it's even better that you are, because you come up with another perspective that we, because Rihanna maybe want to speak to this, as domestics, we have our ideas, but you have what you said, Andre, the whole world. If we all come together, then we may have better solutions that are better for more and not just for an elite group anywhere.
And that's kind of the other thing that I wanted to mention when you started talking, and just kind of popped up in my head, that another thing that like I definitely learned a lot from my American experience. It's kind of, you observe things, you kind of find similarities, you draw the lines, and you see like how systems work in the US and how kind of it is in your country, and how you can actually apply the same tools and the same framework and actually also teach others like from your perspective. But at the same time, what's been hard for me at least is finding the means of doing things when I came back to Russia, because kind of the social system there is absolutely different from the American one. And kind of applying the knowledge that I gained, that's what was the real problem. But overall, I think kind of definitely it would be opening the lines of communications in this way, kind of trying to learn from each other, from different experiences, drawing the parallels. And I feel like colleges and liberal arts colleges in particular do an excellent job at that. Because when you have people coming from different backgrounds, and when you actually have like on-campus events or like community events, even like after college, when you discuss different problems and you contribute from your own different background with your own different story, maybe from your country of origin, and kind of try to draw the parallel lines and see what works and what doesn't, that would definitely kind of be the best way of doing things.
Yeah, I think that's what you said about when you're back in Russia, finding the social system is so different, and like where do you go to? That's exactly like part of what I struggle with now, is like, okay, like I feel like I'm so knowledgeable in some way about like activist social structures in the US. Like I'm connected, like they're like fill my social media, they're my friends, like everything. And in Germany, I'm like, I don't even know like where do I look to, like where do I go, what can I do? I don't know what people what's going on there, where the places are that I should go to or I want to go to, and I don't like, I feel like I'm just like starting. Exactly. And if they even exist, and what they're like, and what kind of like here, I feel like I'm accustomed, like I know what different things mean, and there I would like have to learn that again. So I'm totally, yeah, I really understand what you're saying about that. It's hard.
That is so true. Even with language, my family makes fun of me for not speaking Spanish well, even though it's my native tongue. It's so
Me
strange
too.
to me.
German.
Yeah, I completely like. I think sometimes we push ourselves so hard to fit in, or like to comply by the standards of the country we're currently living in terms of language, in terms of behavior, in terms of thought. Then when we come back to our own countries, we can't bring ourselves to do that naturally anymore. It's such a strange thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that like it's hard to manage, I think, is that when you're back, I don't know like whether you, Annika, or Mafer notice that, but like people look at you as an outsider. and it's kind of hard to get your perspective across, or like things that you do when people like look at them as something foreign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to say something super cliche, but you probably have seen this poem, like "Too foreign for home, too foreign for here, never enough for
Yeah.
both." It's such a cliche
Third
thing, but it's so
culture
true.
kids.
Every
No,
time,
I
yeah,
think
every time
about
I
that a
read that,
lot.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. That poem pops up a lot in my mind.
Yeah, sometimes I try to avoid telling people when I go home that I study here, that I work here, because they treat me differently, and
Mm.
I don't want that. Exactly, it makes me feel like I'm an outsider of my own space, and I really feel like an outsider most of the time. So it's,
Yeah.
Rihanna, you're domestic, and so you went to a liberal arts college with a lot of international students, and you had international experiences. Did that change your relationship perspective when you went back home, or is your family pretty much international anyway?
I didn't hear. Was that to me?
Yes, that was.
Sorry. I was like, this sounds like it's to me, but yeah. And I mean, listening to this, it's like I can draw parallels. Maybe not necessarily with language. Maybe then it becomes a different way of thinking about things, which is its own different language. But yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about when we're thinking about like what is my space. Internationally, yes, very different to come home to a place that is not diverse, both internationally and just domestic diversity. Montana is like an obscene amount, like a percentage of just white. So that in itself, so like during the current context of we're talking about movements, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about like I've experienced a form of FOMO that I didn't expect to have, which is like, what does it mean to be a young person when there's a movement happening and it's not happening where you are? And the kind of privilege of wanting to interact with that, and like wanting to go to it and all these things. And so thinking about like, what is your space? And kind of wondering about that idea of like, if you can't actually like move your body to that space, then how do you use your body in a time like this? And then that goes back into like, can you connect with people at home when it's now like, okay, this is where I am, what's here? And then it becomes, what are people doing? And it becomes very isolated here and it becomes very individual. So there's certain individuals who are moving things. And then you have to kind of jump into that circulation of things. So yeah, I've been really asking myself, like, what can you do with your body when you can't necessarily move your body somewhere, for sure. And I mean, I've been wondering, Mafer, you brought this up earlier, and it was amazing. I wanted to like write a question in our like possible questions, because I was really thinking about the American dream last night, and what happens when you fulfill an expectation, and then what do you do? So thinking about the American dream, I mean, both of you came in 2015, and I mean, 4 years plus. Mafer, did you go to UWC USA?
No, Italy. I
went
to
Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about you guys coming here in 2015, a certain expectation, a certain dream, if you will, what was going to come at the end of this, not necessarily end, but like when you pass that threshold, the expectation of graduating college and then the next step and all these things. And then when you hit all of these thresholds, I definitely felt this spring, it's like, oh my gosh, I did what was expected. This thing that I've been working towards, like the pathway of education, I just checked the box. And now the question is like, what's next? And my lines of questions will be very different, because I'm not dependent on visa. And so that enters a whole different question of what must we do to get that next step or go on to the next step. And yeah, something being home where it becomes interesting. It's like when you're asked, well, what's the plan? And my plan has been like, well, I'm here. Like, I am here. And the next step is to really ask myself, what can I do here? Because I can't leave necessarily. And it's to leave the best option. And then it goes back into community. Like, who are my people? And then I wonder into like a whole nother, there's a couple questions in here, but then I wonder is, like, what does it mean to have a virtual life now? If you can figure out what you can do to serve something where you're at, but maybe your social world isn't there, then how does your world recreate virtually? And that's been a huge discussion. I mean, even this, then it becomes, okay, like Andrey, going back to, can we have a forum? Can we have international discussion about like, what do we want to do? I mean, for me, this is the very first steps of doing that. And on all of our parts, as we continue to make connection and talk about these things. And that in itself, going back into isolation, has just been like so opening. So that's definitely taking it away from socialist dream, American dream.
Wow, you just my mind.
I know it went
No,
everywhere.
in a good way. I think I really appreciate all these questions because they're so true. They make observation of things that are so real for us, specifically the expectations things. Like when I came to the U.S., first of all, I didn't want to come to the U.S. I like when I graduated high school, I was like, there was so much pressure to go into U.S. Colleges, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go home because my main goal was to go home and like to apply all of the things that I have learned while studying abroad, and like just make Mexico a better country. But then it turned out in such a way that like all the support that we had was to find schools in the US, and there was so much pressure from everyone to go to school in the US. So I was like, okay, let me do this 4 years and then I'll go home and then I'll apply all these things. But then as soon as I graduated, there was all this pressure again of like, okay, what's next? You need to find a job in the US. You need to stay for longer. Like you need to start thinking about a green card. You need to start thinking about citizenship. Like what are you doing? So like I feel like yes, I clicked on the yes, I achieved this thing that I was expected to do, but there is always something more. There's always something apart from that. Because I was telling my parents like, okay, yeah, I'm doing a master's. They were like, oh wow, congratulations, and what are you doing after that? I was like, what? Like, there's so much pressure for literally everyone once you made it to the US to just stick around, and it's hard sometimes because it transforms into the question that we were just talking about, like where am I, where do I belong, and like at what point in my life will I have spent so much time here that I am no longer, I'm not like obviously I'll always be a citizen of Mexico, but I won't be a person from there, if that makes sense. Like I'll probably at some point have spent more time here than I've ever spent in my country of origin. So that's just something that's really blows my mind. In terms of expectations.
Can Rihanna, can you recite the questions again? Because I remember there was like three, but
I can get back to it. Yeah, sure. So it's like, yeah. So one of the things I think Mafer really spoke to is like, once you've done what's expected, and then there's this need to hit the bar further. Yeah, I've been wondering, it's like, what do you do when you've hit what's expected? Then how do you plan further? The other questions were like being in a time of like collective crisis. Like that was kind of going into my individual FOMO of not being able to be part of such a movement that like we are identifying with and believe in. If you can't use your body in that, how do you use your body? And then I do have another question if you want to tap on this one.
Yeah, sure.
Mafer, like you saying that, you know, you'll probably spend more time in the US than your country of origin. Like I've always wondered, like I have an immense connection to land. And I've always wondered if I moved somewhere else, like how would I create a connection with land? Because I'm so connected to the mountains in Montana. How do I begin to know a place the same way I know home? And so with both of you who are now like Mafer, you've spent so much time in the US, and now Andrey, like going from Russia to the US and now Israel, like how do you grapple with this? Like, is there a connection to, how do you grapple with the connection to space? How do you ground yourself in each place you go? Because your lives are so transient. So how do you root in?
Oof. Okay, so about the expectations, funny enough, I feel like I have a different expectation story because I've people never expected much from me. So it's for me it wasn't like my mom actually thinks that going to the US was a mistake and I was supposed to stay in our town and like learn how to drive a tractor and like work in our like community as a tractorist. So like it's kind of it was all like, oh, okay, if you want to go, like if you want to do this, yeah, sure, okay. Like it wasn't like I was never expected to achieve something, which was like in some way also kind of strange because like I never felt pressure or support. Because like I feel for me, like when you have an expectation, like if someone expects you to do something, at the same time, kind of it might motivate you more at some points of your life to be like, okay, I gotta like push a little more here to like to reach this goal. But like I didn't really have that, so like I kind of yeah, like which is why actually after finishing Earlham, I like the summer that I spent in Russia, I was really lost. Like I really was not sure what to do with my life. I was like, okay, now I've gotten my I was like, okay, now I'm getting my education and like so I have all this knowledge, but like what do I actually want to do? And that was actually like I was privileged enough to like stay at home with my grandma and like not work for 3 months, and it actually kind of was an eye-opening experience for me to just like reflect on my life, on the things that I've done in my life and how they all connect, and how there is actually kind of a clear picture that I think it's a clear picture for me, like in terms of like what I want to do and how I can apply my skills. So yeah, okay, like the second question. Oh, the second question, like I feel like for me, in terms of like isolation, definitely not being part of it. I also like I can't right now, especially in Israel, what bothers me a lot because there is also some things going on here, but I don't know the language. I don't know either Arabic nor Hebrew. So for me, kind of like trying to figure out what's going on and how to kind of contribute to it was really tough. But at least for now, because I live in a community, and as I said, like we're in a closed campus and we have around 100 people, I feel like for me personally, it was just communicating with people and kind of raising questions and like talking about things and like debating different things, trying to like understand where are the people coming from and like trying to like let them know where I'm coming from on different issues and stuff. So I feel like it's yeah, for me it was just like communication either with people who are around you or like even with people online, like your friends and family. Yeah. And the third question, I remember it was really
Well, I think you
hard.
also like I think you just entered a whole other realm of like the virtual I think was the original one of the three questions is like if you can't be there part of whatever and then you start cultivating another life to fulfill
Oh yeah, right,
the virtual, which
yeah.
you've spoken about getting closer to your family as well.
Yeah, but also like yeah, the last question in terms of like moving so much, I don't have a connection to the land. So like I feel like for me I don't have this problem. I connect to like for me it's mostly about the people around me. So I feel like for me it's just like about finding the right community and about finding the people rather than the land. I mean, for me personally, land is a nice bonus. Uh, but it is actually like about the people who are around you and what the shared resources and like shared social capital that you have and how you can use it. Yeah.
And was that a lot of like what was making your decision to do this program in Israel? Was like, how did you then, because that's something I've been really wondering of like in this summer phase of like, what do I do next? I mean, it's really like something that's come up is like, it comes down to people. It comes down to like, who are the people that I'm close to? What are the values of community that I want to be part of? And like, how did you find things that aligned with yourself too?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. For actually, in terms of like this program was actually a pretty horrible experience in a lot of ways. I mean, it's kind of, it was a great experience, but it was a horrible experience just because I felt like an enemy during the entire time, especially during because of the lockdown. Kind of, you know, like I had to live with people around me whose views were like the polar opposite of my views, and it was like really hard to speak up and to stand my ground. So like it was hard. Like I didn't do this program like because of the community, but I hope once it's all over to find a community. Yeah.
In terms of the question of the land, I think it's very interesting because I think it's both. To me, very early when I started moving around, I had to kind of like tell myself that home was inside of me so that home could come with me anywhere I went, and that included people and places and food and all of these things, that I had to like kind of like carry all these things that mattered to me with myself and like in my backpack, so that when I moved somewhere else they would still be part of me. So that's, I think, a way that I still connect with land, and that I know that it's kind of still in me in some way, and in the people too. But I think I agree with Andre that it comes back to the connections and with people. In terms of the body question that you asked earlier, I think I agree with Andre in that I think this moment is really opening new means by which doing action that didn't exist before, or like they did exist, but people didn't think that they were available, so they weren't taking them. So like social media has been a huge platform. It was already, but like it is now in a very specific way. Like I know, for example, like now we can't go out, but I signed up for this like hotline thing that is helping people who like have like houseless people who have been swept by the police during the protests. And so this is something that I have never thought about like doing while we were in our normal lives, but now it opened up and like people were excited about starting it and people thought that it was important, and so like we created the means. So I think something that this time has given us is like really observing the tools that we have available to us and using them, adapting to the things that are needed now. And I don't think we've done that perfectly, but I think human capacity is huge and we are very creative, and I think we need to be using these tools more.
Yeah. And it's actually really amazing how kind of technology created a lot of different ways to engage people in recent times. But at the same time, I feel like also a lot of people don't have access to technology, which kind of creates this balance as well, that they cannot be a part of something during the times of crisis, and it's like another question of how do you reach out to them and how do you help them.
Well, guys, we've definitely gone way over an hour by now. And I feel like there's so much, there's still a lot going on in my head. I feel like we could talk for several more hours. I don't know where you guys are at, but we're kind of getting close to the end of our time slot here. So I think, I mean, one thing that's definitely like everyone's talked about a lot is like, is this like connecting piece, and like what are we doing right now, like just now what you said about what do we do with our body and how do we engage with like virtual space now. And so I think that this is part of, and also international communication, like what you brought up, Andre, like I think this is like all part of that. And I think so after our project like kind of went downhill when COVID started, our original idea, we were kind of, like Lynn said, we were like on pause for a while. And at some point I was like struggling with these things like myself. I was just, at home working, and I was like, okay, like this is kind of like I'd love to connect again and to reconnect with Earlham and the community there, and also in general, just like how do we connect now? And I was like contemplating that question. And so at that time I was like, well, maybe right now, even though we can't like physically visit each other and talk to each other and do it that way. Maybe right now it's even more important that we do this in some way, because this is like a great way to reconnect and to find other connections, to create connections throughout the world and virtually and in however way. So I think this is like how this reincarnation of the project started. So I hope that everyone kind of got something out of it. And I don't know if there's anything else that anybody wants to say. I think we have some more time.
I'm just really thankful because, as Lynn mentioned before, I don't think there are a lot of people who really want to listen to international student perspective. Even the people who are accepting of internationals as like an acceptable group of people, they don't really stop and listen. And I think we think about so many things and we go through so much, and often it doesn't get heard. So I'm just really thankful for this opportunity and all of your wonderful questions and perspectives too.
Thank you for joining and sharing your perspective. It's been really great hearing from both of you.
I get so excited. We have a wonderful production team. Brianna, Annika, and Lon, the creativity of these three, and that they're willing to come back and let's restructure is just remarkable to me. But it doesn't surprise me with all of you students and being able to have this international perspective. Been a great privilege.
No.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, I'm also so grateful. And just conversation, truly, like going back to what you said earlier, Andre, is like about communicating perspective, like feeling isolated at this time, like being able to not only listen and share with you guys, this is all I can ask for. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all so much.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you everybody for listening. We had a great time talking to Mafer and Andre, and we hope you enjoyed it as well. In the next episode, we will be talking to Anya from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Nabil from the UK, and Dina from Palestine and the US. So tune in again to hear from them. And before we go, we want to give a quick disclaimer. This is an interpersonal chatcast. Any opinions expressed in these conversations are personal and through signed consent belong solely to this project. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. Any views or opinions expressed are not intended to malign or slander any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or state.